The bride who vanished on her wedding day in the quiet hours before dawn. The village of Kilifi stirred slowly to life. The sea whispered in the distance, and the soft wind carried the smell of salt across the clay huts. Palm fronds swayed gently above the narrow paths that ran between the houses. Chickens clucked and the occasional goat bleated as villagers began their early chores. Today, unlike any other, a special tension lingered in the air. There was a wedding. Laila, the daughter of Juma and Amina, was to marry Mwanji, a man whose family had lived on the northern edge of the village for generations. The women gathered outside the round hut where Laila had slept. They hummed quietly as they worked on her hair, braiding it with shells and strips of colorful cloth. Their voices rose and fell like gentle waves. Laila sat with her head bent and her eyes fixed on the floor. She smiled faintly when her mother placed a hand on her shoulder. The air smelled of burning sandalwood and fresh cassava bread. In the courtyard, men had begun the ritual preparation of the wedding meal, steaming pots of rice and coconut stew set over small clay fires. The laughter of children ran through the streets as they chased one another, carrying tiny gifts of flowers for the bride. Yet there was a stillness to Laila that even the village could sense. She did not speak much this morning. Her hands trembled slightly as she adjusted the beads around her neck. Elders from both families had gathered, whispering about arrangements and final blessings. Amina, Laila's mother, tried to mask her worry with a calm smile. She brushed her daughter's cheek gently. The village had always respected Laila for her quiet strength and sharp mind. She had learned the market ways from her grandmother, the songs of the elders, and the old herbal remedies for every common ailment. And yet today, her composure seemed fragile. As the sun rose higher, drums began their soft rhythm, calling the community to the wedding. The men and boys lined the paths leading from the river to the center of the village. The women followed with baskets of food balanced gracefully on their heads. Children ran between them, carrying tiny bundles of flowers. There was a sense of joy and expectation. But as the procession approached Laila's house, a murmur ran through the crowd. Some villagers whispered about Laila's absence from the front doorway. Others said she had gone to prepare herself further. No one knew, but a subtle unease began to weave itself into the morning. Laila's father, Juma, stood rigid near the doorway. He adjusted the cloth around his waist and smoothed the hat that marked his status in the village. He glanced toward the ocean, seeking guidance in the horizon where the sky met the water. Mwanji, standing beside him, frowned slightly. His hands were folded in front of him, but his eyes darted toward the small path that led to Laila's hut. The villagers waited in silence as the elder of the village stepped forward, clearing his throat. He began the opening words of the ceremony, invoking blessings for the couple, the families, and the community. The sun climbed higher and shadows stretched across the courtyard. Still Laila did not appear. Children began to fidget. Mothers nudged one another and whispered questions. Juma's eyes burned with worry. Mwanji's shoulders stiffened. The drums quieted, replaced by the soft sighing of the wind through the palm fronds. Amina's hands shook slightly as she adjusted the veil that had been prepared for Laila. She whispered prayers under her breath, glancing toward the small doorway again and again. Then one of the older women whispered something. The words were low, almost afraid. Laila was not in her room. She was gone. Panic did not come all at once. It seeped quietly at first. The elder stepped forward, trying to maintain calm. He called for the women to check the back of the house and the small garden where Laila liked to sit when she wanted to think. The children were asked to remain with their mothers. The villagers spread quietly in small groups, their voices low. Mwanji's face was pale. He glanced at Juma, who was staring at the doorway as though Laila would appear at any moment. The sunlight danced across the clay walls, but there was no movement. Minutes passed like hours. The elder tried to speak again, his voice softer this time, asking if anyone had seen the bride. Some murmured that she had walked toward the forest path at the edge of the village. Others said she had not been seen since early dawn. The tension in the air grew heavier. The smells of cooking food, the sound of waves, the quiet chirping of birds all became secondary to the uncertainty that hung over the gathering. Even the children sensed it. Their laughter had disappeared. They stood close to their mothers, watching the adults in small clusters. By mid-morning, the entire village was involved. Groups walked along the narrow trails toward the ocean cliffs and the mangroves. Elders called for patience. They reminded one another that sometimes young brides wandered to be alone before a ceremony. But as the sun rose higher and the breeze turned warm, the worry became undeniable. Juma's voice, once calm and steady, grew sharp with fear. Amina held tightly to her shawl, her eyes scanning every tree and path. Mwangi moved from one group to the next, asking if anyone had seen Laila. The drums remained silent. The wedding food cooled in the clay pots. The villagers waited. In the market square, whispers began to spread. Some said Laila had refused the marriage. Others suggested she had gone to find someone who could offer her a different life. There were murmurs about family obligations and customs that had shaped her upbringing. Women spoke in low voices about the pressures placed on young girls, about expectations and traditions that were sometimes too heavy to bear. Men discussed honor, wealth, and alliances between families. Every story, every whisper, carried part truth and part speculation. The tension grew like a tide creeping slowly across the village. And then a small group returned from the river bend. They had found a single sandal. It was delicate and finely woven. There was no other trace of Laila. The elder took it in his hands and turned it slowly. The village held its breath. Amina's knees bent as she pressed her forehead to the clay floor. Juma stood frozen, gripping the edge of a table. Mwangi's hand shook as he reached out to touch the sandal. The whispers became louder. Every villager tried to make sense of what had happened. The morning sun climbed relentlessly. The breeze shifted softly, and still there was no sign of the bride. Let us move forward in the day. The village prepared for what no one had expected. The wedding could not continue, yet the people did not scatter. They lingered in small circles, speaking quietly, sharing stories, debating what might have caused Laila to vanish. Even the children sensed that this was not ordinary. Their mothers told them to play, but their small feet tread lightly, hesitant, uncertain. And the older women who had braided her hair, who had tied her veil, began to whisper about obligations and pressures, about secrets that sometimes leave young women with no choice. By afternoon, the market stalls were half empty. Traders had come expecting celebration, but instead they found tension. The aroma of coconuts drifted slowly through the village, mixing with the salty air from the ocean. Elders gathered near the small shrine at the center of the village, their voices low and measured, offering guidance and quiet prayers. Every hour brought more anxiety. Every sound seemed amplified. The gentle swaying of palm fronds became a soft drum of worry. The village, which had started the day in celebration, now moved in careful steps, quietly, collectively, awaiting any sign of Laila. As the sun began its slow descent toward the horizon, the village of Kilifi took on a soft golden hue. The ocean glimmered faintly in the distance, and the breeze carried the taste of salt and coconut. The village had grown quieter than usual. Children moved in pairs or small clusters, whispering about the bride who had vanished. Adults gathered near the marketplace and along the narrow paths, speaking in hushed tones. Laila's absence was now a tangible presence. Her parents sat together beneath the shade of a baobab tree, their hands clasped tightly as if holding onto one another could anchor reality. Juma's face was drawn and lined with worry. He spoke rarely, but when he did, his words carried the weight of fear and uncertainty. He asked each villager if they had seen Laila, retraced the paths she might have taken, and questioned the neighbors who had last seen her at dawn. Each answer, each shake of the head, only deepened the hollow pit growing in his chest. Amina, her shawl wrapped tightly around her shoulders, murmured prayers for her daughter. She recalled Laila's childhood, her quiet moments by the ocean, the small miracles she had found in everyday life. Every memory now seemed fragile, as if the wind could carry it away. Mwangi wandered among the villagers, attempting to offer comfort, yet his own worry shadowed him. He asked the elders what traditions might explain a young bride's sudden departure. One elder suggested that sometimes a young woman, overwhelmed by the weight of family and societal expectations, seeks solitude to think. Another elder murmured about the old stories of brides who had run away, seeking a life beyond the village. Their voices were calm yet carried a subtle tension. Mwangi could feel the eyes of the villagers upon him, some with judgment, some with pity. The wedding had begun with hope and expectation, and now it lingered as a question too heavy for words. By late afternoon, search parties had returned from the surrounding forest and riverbanks. They reported finding no trace of Laila. The small paths through the mangroves yielded only footprints that led into the tide and vanished. The elder called for a council in the open space near the village shrine. The villagers gathered, forming a circle that hummed with quiet murmurs. Some mothers held their children close, some men stood with arms crossed, and the elders spoke softly, weighing the situation with measured voices. The council reminded everyone that the village must act together to find Laila. Among the whispers and speculation, the truth of Laila's life began to emerge in fragments. She had been raised carefully, taught the rhythms of the tides, the seasons, and the forest. She knew the songs that healed the sick, the rituals that honored ancestors, and the ways of the market. But she had also learned the subtle rules of obedience, of expectation, of family honor. In the past weeks, some villagers had noticed her hesitation. She had been quieter than usual, lingering at the river, staring toward the distant horizon. Some believed she had sensed the burden of the wedding, the pressure of her role as a young bride. Others thought perhaps she had been frightened by village politics, the unseen tensions between families that often dictated the lives of young women. Evening approached, casting long shadows across the clay paths. The search continued along the edges of the village, past the old baobabs and toward the rocky cliffs that fell into the ocean. The wind brought whispers of children's voices from the distance, of waves breaking against the shore. Each step taken in the fading light seemed heavier than the last. Women carried lanterns and small bundles of food, hoping that Laila would be found soon, hoping she had not ventured too far. Men walked in pairs, calling her name softly, their voices absorbed by the dense evening air. The smell of coconut stew and roasted cassava lingered, but no one had the appetite to eat. Amina knelt near the center of the village, pressing her forehead against the clay floor. She repeated her prayers, asking the ancestors to protect her daughter, to guide her home. Juma placed a hand over hers, his face pale under the soft light of the setting sun. Mwanji approached slowly, lowering his gaze. His voice was gentle when he spoke. He reminded them all of the teachings they had grown up with, of patience, respect, and faith. He suggested that perhaps Laila needed time, that she might return when ready. Yet even as he spoke, his own eyes betrayed the tension and fear that gripped him. The villagers began to settle for the night. Small fires were lit in the courtyards, their flickering flames casting shadows across the walls. Women shared blankets and whispered old stories to calm the children. Elders reminded everyone that the ocean tides would guide and protect, that sometimes young women disappeared only to find strength and return. But as darkness fell, the absence of Laila was felt like a tangible weight pressing on every heart. The sound of the waves became a solemn rhythm, the gentle wind a mournful voice carrying questions unanswered. In the shadows, a group of young women spoke quietly. They remembered Laila's curiosity about the world beyond Kilifi, her desire to learn, her dreams of walking along distant shores. They wondered if she had left to escape expectations, to carve a path of her own. These thoughts were careful, almost reverent, for to speak too loudly was to risk disrespecting family and tradition. Yet in the low voices, a thread of understanding emerged. Laila had been raised in a village bound by custom, by rituals, by obligations. Sometimes even the gentlest of hearts could not bear the weight of these unseen chains. By nightfall, the village had assumed a vigil. Fires glowed softly, illuminating faces etched with worry. Lanterns were placed near doorways and along paths, guiding any who might return. Elders led prayers and whispered stories of protection, of journeys safely completed, of the importance of patience and faith. The ocean murmured a slow rhythm, and the wind rustled through the palm fronds. Villagers huddled in small groups, recounting memories of Laila, of her laughter, of the small ways she had brightened their days. Each story became a lifeline, connecting hope with the unseen presence of the bride. As the night deepened, Mwanji stood by the edge of the village near the cliffs. He listened to the waves, the soft cries of birds returning to their nests, the distant laughter of children whose sleep was restless. He wondered if Laila had felt trapped by duty, by expectation, or by the heavy weight of tradition. His heart carried both hope and despair. He did not speak aloud, for words seemed inadequate. Instead, he waited, the wind carrying his silent plea into the darkness. Now we step into the next moment. The villagers, tired yet unwilling to abandon hope, began to consider what the coming days might demand. They spoke of searching farther along the coast, beyond the cliffs, into the hidden coves where the tide might carry messages unseen. Some wondered if Laila had been taken by fate or by her own choices. Others feared whispers of shame and dishonor. Yet beneath all uncertainty remained a quiet thread of hope, fragile, but present, like the first light of dawn. The first light of dawn arrived slowly, painting the village of Kilifi in soft gold and rose hues. Palm fronds swayed gently in the breeze, carrying the faint smell of salt from the nearby ocean. The village was quiet except for the soft murmur of elders who had gathered beneath the baobab tree. Children moved slowly, reluctant to leave the warmth of blankets and small fires, sensing the tension that had stretched over the village for nights. Laila's absence had become a presence itself, shaping every movement, every glance, every word spoken. Juma and Amina remained at the center of the village, their shoulders heavy with worry. Amina clutched a small piece of Laila's veil, tracing the fine embroidery with her fingers, whispering silent prayers. Juma's eyes followed every shadow and every movement along the paths, seeking something that might hint at his daughter's whereabouts. Mwanji, though exhausted and pale, remained close, standing with his hands folded, listening to the gentle rhythm of the waves. He spoke softly, reminding them that Laila was clever, resourceful, and familiar with the land. Perhaps she had sought a place of quiet reflection, a moment to decide the path she would take. Yet even as he said the words, his heart carried the weight of fear and uncertainty. The villagers slowly gathered again, forming search parties to move beyond the familiar paths of Kilifi. They went along the rocky cliffs, through the mangroves, and into the small coves where the tide had left traces of driftwood and shells. Women carried water and baskets of food. Men moved quietly with small lanterns and sturdy sticks to navigate the underbrush. Each footprint was studied, each rustle of leaves examined, yet no trace of Laila appeared. The air was heavy with the smell of wet earth and salt. The soft cries of birds were interrupted by the occasional call of villagers moving cautiously through the landscape. In small clusters, whispers spread about Laila's life and her hidden burdens. Some remembered her gentle persistence in the market, her quiet resolve when elders debated village matters. Others spoke of the ways tradition had weighed upon her, of customs that demanded obedience and measured every choice. Women nodded slowly, understanding that Laila had lived with a tension invisible to many but clear to those who had watched her grow. The story of her disappearance began to intertwine with the collective memory of the village, creating a pattern of speculation, worry, and empathy. By mid-morning, the elders called everyone together near the shrine. They spoke carefully, emphasizing patience and respect. They reminded the villagers that Laila's safety was the priority. She was not lost by chance, but perhaps by design, seeking clarity or solace away from the crowd and the expectations pressing upon her. Some young women exchanged glances, recalling their own quiet moments of hesitation, their desire for freedom within the boundaries of custom. There was an understanding that sometimes the hearts of young women carried burdens unseen, and actions that seemed mysterious could be deeply human responses to the weight of tradition. As the sun rose higher, Mwanji walked along the shoreline. The wind was stronger here, carrying the smell of wet sand and seaweed. He traced the small footprints left along the tide line, remembering the stories elders had told of brides who had wandered, of journeys that were both literal and metaphorical. Each step along the sand felt heavier than the last. He paused to examine driftwood and shells, hoping for a clue, a small sign that might indicate Laila's path. The ocean murmured quietly, the waves folding onto themselves with soft, persistent rhythm, as if offering both solace and mystery. Back in the village, Juma and Amina began speaking with the women who had prepared Laila's veil and braided her hair. They spoke of hopes and fears, of the careful observance of tradition, of the delicate balance between choice and obligation. Amina pressed her daughter's small sandal into her hands, feeling the warmth of the leather as if it could transmit messages. The elders suggested that Laila might be testing her courage, exploring her own strength before returning to the responsibilities waiting for her. There was a quiet acknowledgement that sometimes young women carried a private knowledge, an inner map that guided them through moments of uncertainty. The villagers worked in silence for hours. Even the children, now more aware of absence than presence, wandered quietly through paths that were familiar yet transformed by tension. Conversations turned to quiet observation. Some men climbed small hills to survey the forest edge. Women moved in small groups along narrow paths, checking gardens and hidden nooks where Laila often sought solitude. Every movement became a measured act, every sound considered. There was no panic, no harsh words, only the gentle rhythm of concern flowing through the village. By late afternoon, the search parties had returned with little to show. The ocean and the forest yielded only shadows and wind. The elders gathered once more beneath the baobab, their voices low and steady. They reminded the villagers of the stories carried through generations, of resilience, of patience, of the journeys that shaped young women in ways invisible to the casual eye. Mwangi listened carefully, understanding that the path to finding Laila required more than haste. It demanded observation, respect, and the quiet endurance of those who waited. Amina sat near the center of the village, her shawl wrapped tightly, speaking softly to the small children who had been too close to the bustle. She told them stories of their mother, of Layla's curiosity, kindness, and gentle laughter. These stories floated into the evening air, mingling with the smell of cooking fires and the soft lap of waves. Juma remained beside her, occasionally glancing toward the paths leading from the village. He spoke quietly of hope, of trust, of the necessity of understanding that Layla's disappearance, while troubling, might be a passage toward growth, clarity, or revelation. As dusk approached, lanterns were placed along the main paths. Fires glowed softly in small courtyards. The village held its breath in collective patience. Each sound was noted, each movement observed. Even the waves seemed to pause, carrying whispers that could be understood only by those attuned to the rhythms of the land. Elders encouraged the villagers to maintain calm, to honor the unknown journey of Laila, and to prepare themselves for the possibility of return or revelation. The night settled softly over Kilifi. Stars emerged over the ocean, reflected in the gentle rise and fall of the tide. The village remained vigilant yet serene. There was no chaos, only quiet expectation, a collective awareness that the days ahead might bring understanding, reconciliation, or answers hidden in paths untaken. The absence of Laila was a silent lesson to all, that sometimes the heart must wander before it can fully return. And that patience, hope, and faith were as vital as the tides that shaped the life of the village. The morning arrived with a calm that felt almost deliberate, as if the village of Kilifi were holding its breath. The sun rose slowly, painting the clay walls of the huts in soft amber. The palm fronds swayed gently in the light breeze. The ocean hummed quietly, a steady rhythm that seemed to mirror the villagers' hearts. They moved with measured steps, still mindful of Layla's absence, yet determined to continue the life of the village while waiting. Juma and Amina had taken their places beneath the baobab tree, where the elders gathered to offer guidance and counsel. Their faces were etched with the fatigue of sleepless nights, their eyes shadowed by worry. Yet there was also a quiet resolve. They spoke in low voices about hope, about trust, and about the delicate balance of freedom and responsibility that defined Layla's generation. Mwangi, standing nearby, listened and nodded. He carried his concern silently, holding it like a fragile vessel. Each word spoken by the elders seemed to anchor the collective patience of the village. By mid-morning, whispers had spread through Kilifi about the possible reasons for Layla's disappearance. Some said she had wandered to find a place of solitude, seeking clarity about the path ahead. Others spoke of hidden pressures within the family and the subtle expectations that sometimes constrain young women. Women nodded knowingly. They had all walked the tightrope of tradition and desire. Men listened carefully, some with regret, some with understanding, realizing that the young bride's choice was not a rebellion but a human response to unseen burdens. The search continued with calm determination. Groups moved toward the rocky cliffs along the coastline, tracing the edge of the forest, and following narrow paths through the mangroves. Each footprint was examined, each rustle in the undergrowth noted. Women carried lanterns and small bundles of food. Men walked quietly with sticks to navigate difficult terrain, and the children followed in clusters under the watchful eyes of mothers. The breeze carried the smell of wet earth, coconut, and salt. Every sound seemed magnified, the waves breaking on rocks, the cry of distant birds, the soft murmur of villagers moving cautiously through the landscape. By afternoon, some searchers returned to the village to report sightings of distant footprints that disappeared into the undergrowth, traces that suggested Laila had followed the paths she knew well. The elders interpreted these signs quietly, emphasizing patience and reflection. They reminded the villagers that Layla's journey might not be entirely literal, that she might have sought clarity within herself before returning to the village. There was a gentle acknowledgement that young women sometimes needed space to reconcile personal desire with familial and societal expectations. Amina sat in the courtyard, her hands folded over the small remnants of Laila's veil. She spoke softly to the children, telling them stories of their mother's curiosity, kindness, and intelligence. She reminded them of the small ways Laila had brightened their days and of her careful attention to the rhythms of village life. Each story was a thread, weaving hope into the hearts of those who listened. Juma remained nearby, his gaze shifting between the distant horizon and the small gatherings of villagers. He spoke quietly of faith, of resilience, and of the necessity of waiting with open hearts. As the sun began to dip toward the horizon, Mwangi made his way to the shoreline. He followed the patterns of the tide, the driftwood, and the shells that lined the sand. He called Laila's name softly, allowing the sound to drift over the waves. The ocean replied with its gentle rhythm, the tide moving in and out as if in quiet acknowledgement. Mwangi's heart was heavy yet steady. He understood that Laila's absence was both a challenge and a lesson in patience, in trust, and in the quiet endurance required of those who love deeply. Back in the village, the elders gathered once more beneath the baobab tree. They spoke of paths chosen and journeys undertaken, of the ways that young women navigated the expectations of family and tradition. Their words were measured, deliberate, and full of empathy. Villagers listened quietly, internalizing the wisdom shared. The stories of Laila's disappearance began to transform from concern into reflection, from panic into understanding. Even the children sensed this shift, moving with a quiet attentiveness that reflected the collective mood. As evening settled over Kilifi, a faint figure appeared at the edge of the village. Women noticed first, whispering to one another with cautious hope. The figure moved slowly, deliberately, and soon the outline of Laila became clear. Her clothes were simple, her hair loosely braided, and she carried herself with a quiet strength. Juma and Amina rushed forward, embracing her with relief and tenderness. Tears fell quietly as they held her, feeling the weight of the past days lift ever so slightly. Mwangi stood beside them, his hand finding hers, offering silent reassurance and love. Laila spoke softly, recounting her journey in careful words. She had sought solitude along the coastline, reflecting on her life, her desires, and the expectations placed upon her. She had walked in silence, thinking of the village, her family, and the future she wished to shape for herself. Her absence had been deliberate, a moment of reflection that allowed her to understand her own heart. The elders listened, nodding with gentle understanding, recognizing the quiet courage it had taken for a young woman to navigate both freedom and responsibility. The village slowly returned to its rhythm. Fires glowed softly, lanterns were lit along the paths, and the air carried the smell of evening meals. Children ran along the clay paths, their laughter cautious but joyful. Adults moved with deliberate care, checking one another with small smiles and quiet gestures of reassurance. Laila's presence, gentle yet strong, infused the village with a renewed sense of balance. The absence had been a reminder of patience, trust, and the intricate harmony between individual choice and communal life. By nightfall, Kilifi had settled into quiet peace. The ocean murmured a gentle rhythm against the shore. The palm fronds swayed softly in the breeze. Fires burned in the courtyards, illuminating faces marked by worry, relief, and understanding. Laila sat with her parents and Mwangi, sharing a simple meal and quiet conversation. The elders gathered nearby, offering blessings and gentle guidance. The village had learned something profound, that the hearts of young women carried strength and wisdom, that absence could teach patience, and that understanding often came through quiet observation rather than urgent action. And so Kilifi returned to its rhythm. Life continued, carrying with it the gentle memory of Laila's journey, the lessons of patience and empathy, and the quiet celebration of resilience. The bride who had vanished had returned, not with loud fanfare or spectacle, but with a presence that reminded the village of the depth of human courage, the subtle power of reflection, and the enduring strength of the bonds that tied them together. The moon rose over the ocean, casting a silver glow across the village. The palm fronds rustled softly, and the waves lapped gently against the shore. Kilifi slept under the quiet protection of night, carrying the story of Laila within its heart, a story of courage, reflection, and the quiet triumph of understanding. The village, the family, and the young bride moved forward, each carrying the lessons of the days that had stretched from dawn to night, a story whispered among the palms and the waves, remembered for generations to come.